Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back to do the first ever How to Play update on the TenSura collab characters. Those are the That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime characters. I made How to Play videos for both Rimuru and Milim when they first came out, and it's time for us to kind of check back in and see how things are in 2023. Epic 7 is a competitive game that is constantly changing with the addition of buffs, nerfs, addition of new characters, artifacts being added, battle frenzy changes, and then just the fact that, again, it's a competitive game. Metagames do develop. Characters will be built differently today than they were in the past. So I think it's important, just like the game is constantly evolving, that I evolve my stance on how I do How to Play videos. I try very hard to make those videos as comprehensive and thorough as possible, but I cannot predict the future. I cannot predict that in the future we would have played Senya on effect resistance as opposed to high damage like she was when I made How to Play Senya. I have in the past pinned the changes to the characters and their newer builds to the top of videos, but those I feel like largely go unignored. So I feel like from time to time I will now have to revisit some of these characters and their builds and talk about the changes and why they are that way when I do those update videos. So for this one, again, it's going to be on the TenSura characters. We're going to talk about Rimuru. We're going to talk about Milim. We're also going to talk about Shuna in this video. And I will do all of this in one take, all three characters, and kind of explain to you why characters are built the way they are now in 2023. So let's kick it off with the main man himself, Rimuru Tempest. Rimuru Tempest, when we made How to Play Rimuru, was the best character in the game. But I only had about a week to hypothesize how to build the character and put that video out because I couldn't just not have my viewer base have something to use when Rimuru is literally the dominant character in the game everywhere. It was paramount that I get something out the door for you all. I hypothesized 3 builds at the time: a glass cannon build on penetration set, a standard speed build, and then a tanky build on Rimuru. Where Rimuru lands today in 2023 is actually squarely in the middle of the first 2 builds that I hypothesized, a penetration build as well as a standard build that is on the speed set. He is on 3 of the 2-piece sets like I hypothesized for the aggressive build, but his stats are geared more towards the standard speed set build. So that's kind of where he landed. You nowadays will draft or play Rimuru in 2 scenarios. Number 1, against high bulk, low health characters, or characters that have a mechanic that makes it so that they can't take more than 50% damage in one hit, because Devour Black Flame doesn't really care about that and kills those characters. So think of characters like Spirit Eye Celine or characters like Lionheart Sirmia. The second place that you play him is going to be against Command Model Leica, assuming she is on the Artifact Guiding Light, because this character with Analyze and Assess and an immunity set buff at the start kind of just hard counters everything that that character does and shuts down a lot of those pesky aggressive or cleave style drafts. So that's primarily where you play Rimuru nowadays. A standard DPS Rimuru nowadays looks like the following. It is on a 2-piece critical hit chance set, a 2-piece immunity set for not only that counter to Leica we talked about, but to amp the damage, if you recall, on Devour Black Flame, because it cares about the number of buffs on your team. And then penetration set because it naturally boosts his damage. The offsets, you can replace the critical hit chance offset with almost anything, whether that is health, defense. I've even used hit in the past. You can use broken set, whatever helps you get the stats, because as you'll see, this build doesn't really require very high stats. It just requires a lot of stats in various different amounts. Looking at the desired stats, we have 3k attack, 1200 defense, 15k HP, 190 speed, although I personally like around 195 to 200, 100% critical hit chance, 250% critical hit damage, although I personally play around 240. You can go as low as, say, maybe 220 or even 230. It depends entirely on what you're looking for, and no effectiveness or effect resistance on this character. Looking at the right side, critical hit damage necklace in order to give us the most amount of damage, but you could play critical hit chance if you so desire, or even health percentage. Again, it depends on what you're actually looking for on the character. He doesn't really need a whole heck of a lot. The actual build that I showed you, those desired stats, that's fine. If you want to go lower on some of the stuff or higher on others, that is fine. The primary takeaway is that he should have some level of damage on penetration set and immunity set. The third 2-piece set doesn't entirely matter. Ring's attack percentage, because mathematically it's the easiest to work with, although health percentage isn't too far behind on the main stat for the ring. Boots' speed, as always, take turns in a timely fashion. Recommended artifact, Draco Plate. It is a limited artifact. I like this one because it gives damage mitigation as well as bonus damage on the character. You don't necessarily have to play it. You could play Proof of Valor. That is definitely a very popular option because when people see Rimuru, they're probably going to focus him, so it naturally makes sense. That said, Proof of Valor is a highly contested artifact for characters like Apocalypse Ravi or Lionheart Cermia, so you might not actually want to play that. Anti-Magic Mask is going to be what you'd want to play, I think, on Rimuru if you don't have access to either Draco Plate or Proof of Valor. You could also play Symbol of Unity here in this slot if you so choose, or any other damage-boosting artifact, Portrait, Prelude, whatever. If you notice here, with the average piece here, I have 10% attack, 12% critical hit chance, 8 speed, and 14% health. But you'll also notice there's still 9% defense and 6% critical hit damage in here. So you need to massively exceed some of these average piece numbers in order to make things work, because you can't have 6 substats on a piece. So you don't need a lot of really high stats to make Rimuru work like this, but you are going to need a good mix of your actual substats. So you might need like 20% health and 15% defense and like high speed on one. And then kind of, okay, this one is going to be focused heavily on crit chance and attack and crit damage and so on and so forth. So you're going to need a mix of how you actually build this character. The other build that Rimuru is commonly played on nowadays is a tankier build that is meant for soul burning and spamming his S3. That one is played on a speed set with an immunity offset. A speed set just gives the most amount of free stats because the tanky Rimuru is not a damage dealer. You're just trying to make him very difficult to kill, so that way he can keep soul burning Devour Black Flame for max value, and every other turn just kind of getting that free 10k damage here and there. Offsets, I have Resist, because some people choose to play this tanky Rimuru with a ton of effect resistance to bait characters like Solitaria of the Snow. Solitaria of the Snow is one of the best hard counters to Rimuru Tempest currently, because you can just use her S3 and that will negate his S2 Analyze and Assess, basically absorb the usage of it, and kind of renders the character pretty, dead on board, not really super useful. But if you build him with high enough effect resistance, you might potentially be able to bait that Solitaria, resist it, and then not have to deal with it, and then just go about your, days spamming the Soul Burn on Rimuru, just getting max value out of it. Looking at the desired stats, 1,761 attack, 15k defense, 20k HP, 200 speed, no critical hit chance or critical hit damage, and then your choice, depending on whether or not you want this character to bait Solitarias, you want to bait people in the draft with it, with 0 to 130% effect resistance. That is going to be your choice. Looking at the right side gear, health percentage necklace, although you could play defense percentage if you so chose. Ring is going to be health percentage. If you decide to go for the ER Rimuru, then you can definitely try to go for the effect resistance ring. And then defense percentage is still definitely an option as well to make the stats line up. I leave that to you. Boots, going to be speed. Artifact on this one, Proof of Valor, if you are just trying to have a tanky, soul burn spamming Rimuru. If you're trying to bait characters like Solitaria, you're probably going to want to choose Bastion of Hope. Looking at the per piece average, 18% defense, 4 speed, 6% health, and a whopping 21% per piece average ER if, again, you decide to go that route of baiting Rimuru. Of the two, I think the standard Rimuru is a lot better, but you could definitely use the tanky or effect resistance variant of Rimuru if you're very crafty. He's a bit harder to use, a bit harder to have success with, but definitely high-ranked players in the past have had a lot of success with him. Now let's move on to the dragon girl herself, Milim Nava. So, Milim is almost exactly as hypothesized. Her speed build to burst down Landies with the penetration set, as well as the ancient book, is largely unchanged. This one is not really too much different. So if we look at the speed DPS Milim, she is on speed penetration. Although if you do not have penetration set, you can use critical hit chance or immunity for all of the math in this section. I am assuming you are on the 12% critical hit chance exclusive equipment, which unfortunately you cannot obtain, I believe, until week 2 of the collab. So when this video airs, you will not have access to the critical hit chance exclusive equipment. You will have to just wait to farm it. That said, you don't need to spend resources on it, so at least that's kind of nice. The desired stats are not too far off. I kind of got Milim pretty on the nose when I made how to play Milim Nava. We have 3,800 attack, 1200 defense, 10k health, 230 or better speed. I think 230 is where most people have kind of settled on the character, although you could go as fast as 240. 220 is probably still also quite all right. 100% critical hit chance, 280% critical hit damage, no effectiveness or effect resistance. Right side gear, critical hit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, because we're just trying to do as much damage as possible, and boots are going to be, of course, speed. Artifact is going to be Tagahel's Ancient Book, so that way we can soul burn with her S1 and go right into Dragon Fear to get that extinction guaranteed on Landy. You will also have Portrait and Symbol as options if you just, for whatever reason, decide not to go with Book, or in the future, Book actually ends up getting nerfed or changed in some way. But yeah, this one's fairly standard. It was pretty simple on how we would play the character back then. Nothing has really changed on this. I've kind of just cleaned up the math of it. But otherwise, this is like 99% the same as the original video. Just pick Milim into Landy or whatever you have. Have her get to her first turn. Soul burn your S1, and again, just Dragon Fear for the extinction. For this build in particular, I would go with exclusive equipment number 3 to get the extra focus. If you kill with Dragon Fear, I think it lends itself a bit better to this build because it's more aggressive, and you would like to get off that turn to Dragon Buster. Looking at the per piece average, it is 16% attack, 11% critical hit chance, 12% critical hit damage, and 10 speed. The more interesting build to talk about in with Milim nowadays is actually the one that I talked about in my most recent Emperor account review for the Triumph season. I was losing a ton of sleep trying to figure out how can I play a Milim that can beat Landy, that can survive an initial burst. Because when you play Milim into Landy, most people will ban it unless they are confident that they can kill the Milim. So if you're going with the speed Milim, you have to be tricky and make sure that you can absolutely take turn 1. If you can't, that Milim's probably dead. So we have kind of pivoted now, another build that has opened up, to be a much more tanky Milim. Originally, I hypothesized a counter Milim based on stuff that I had seen Elfmage play, and that wasn't too far off, but the build and the numbers are quite different. So if we look at a tanky Milim build, which is meant to survive a bunch of burst damage until she gets to her first turn, so that way she can kill Landy, it's going to look something like this. For primary sets, I am on Lifesteal and Penetration, although you can absolutely play Counter Penetration. With Milim's new exclusive equipment that makes it so that her S1 Dragon Dive has built-in Lifesteal, or I should say more built-in Lifesteal than it already has, you might not actually need the Lifesteal set anymore. I am personally playing Lifesteal for comfort and because I have a bunch of Bruiser Lifesteal gear just kind of laying around. But I probably would hypothesize that Counter is a bit better with the new exclusive equipment. Unfortunately, cannot actually test it until week 2. So again, that is pretty much another hypothesis here. So yeah, Counter Pen or Lifesteal Pen I think is really good. If you don't have Penetration, and you just can't make the stats work with Penetration, you can absolutely go with Critical Hit Chance or Immunity. Those are also viable options. Looking at the desired stats, we have 3,400 attack, and you'll notice we have 250 critical hit damage. We're lowering that damage threshold a bit on Milim because, again, the priority is to survive. If we actually make it to our first turn, then Milim should be able to do the job from there. For defense and health, I have 1,300 defense and 13k health. This is essentially 70k effective HP for you Fribbles people out there. So you could go like 1,200 defense, 14k HP, or you can go like 1,400 defense and like 12.5k HP. Those all roughly line up to the same level of bulk. Because Milim is a mage, you might have an easier time with that like 1,400 defense, 12.5k HP. Again, leave that all to you. Speed here, 185. I think that is pretty much where I'd want to play Milim. You could go a little bit faster without sacrificing stats. Go ahead. By all means, as always, do it. But yeah, 185 I think is where I've settled. 185, 190. I think that is a pretty good range for a tankier Milim. I think it's not too slow, just enough for you to actually get the job done. Like I already said, 250% critical hit damage, no effectiveness or effect resistance. Looking at the right side gear, critical hit damage on the necklace, HP percentage on the ring. I think that makes it a bit easier, although you could go for attack percentage if you just have like a critical hit damage necklace and an attack percentage ring with just a ton of health built into it. Booster speed as always for the reasons that we always talk about. Artifact, still on Ancient Book here. I think it still gives you that, 2-turn, 2-tap burst against Landy, which is primarily what you're picking Milim for most of the time. That said, upgraded Dragon Knuckles is something really nuts and can absolutely hard carry games. If you decide you want to go the upgraded Dragon Knuckles route, you need to make sure that it is plus 30. So you either need to invest heavily into Milim's banner, get very lucky on Milim's banner, or hard commit to using your potion vials to actually getting this thing to plus 30. You really need every inch of that actual counter chance that upgraded Dragon Knuckles has in order for it to really be worth it. So for most people, I highly recommend Ancient Book, but either counter set or lifesteal set on plus 30 upgraded Dragon Knuckles for me has been really, really good. And with this tankier version of Milim with that artifact, I really like it. I think it is something that's a bit more generically draftable than a Speed Milim. Speed Milim, again, is really just for Landy, and it's not something you'd want to play long term. It doesn't really have staying power in bruiser matches, but I've, again, had a lot of success just picking this tanky Milim as a generic red bruiser when I actually need her. I've used her in like Red's lobbies, if you've ever watched any of his stuff, and I've done fairly well there as well. I've been a couple of times on the official Epic 7 Discord server showing off Milim there, showing the power of tanky Milim. So that is definitely, speaks to, I think, my experience with it and how much I really like this. This is one of the most important things from last season, was to kind of go with this tankier Milim. It became super, super important in the later parts of that season. And I still think she is incredibly relevant even today, even though you probably don't see her a whole heck of a lot on your favorite streamer's stream. So let's round out the video by talking about Shuna. So, Shuna is the new kid on the block. She was unplayable pretty much the last time the collab came around, and she was buffed last week. I went to Smilegate's HQ to do that stream last week, and when I returned, much to my surprise, Big Smo was actually playing Shuna in Legend RTA, and surprisingly was running into a lot of Shunas as well in Legend RTA. And when I was at Smilegate, I kept saying to Mashu, I think Shuna is actually really good. I think that this character is super slept on. I think that this character might be something truly special. And the pushback that I got was, yeah, she's good, but she might not be that good. And even talking to Smo, he's unsure as well. So right now, there's a lot of uncertainty around Shuna. I have a lot of faith in this character, but I think that the community at large does not. A lot of members in the community. So I still want to highlight Shuna because I think that this character, if she is still seeing regular usage in Legend RTA, then there has to be something here. I know we're still in the experimental phase, but this character on paper reads very good. Magical Explosion is essentially Desert Jewel Basar's S1, sans the stun. It has worse healing, yes, but it is still better than most other Soul Weaver S1s in the game. Blooming Lotus is a dispel, as well as a barrier, and also it gives that redistribution of health, which makes it synergize insanely well with Diane's artifact Unfading Memories. You just use the S2, you get the cleanse, you get the barrier, you redistribute the health, and then afterwards you heal it back up with an AoE heal. And then Sleeping Spell is a strip, as well as a sleep and an attack down, making it incredibly good into a character like Mediator Kawaric. You can essentially hold Nature Restoration hostage on the character. If he presses S3, you can just Sleeping Spell, remove all of the buffs, and then sleep his whole team and control him at will. So this character on paper feels very, very strong, especially, again, with an artifact like Unfading Memories. That said, it's still new. We haven't figured everything out. We could find out this character is absolutely garbage. That said, I still wanted to highlight it. I think it is potentially a very, very good Soul Weaver for standard or turn 2 players. So let's look at my hypothesized build for Shuna, how I would play this character going forward. I am on a speed set with a resist offset, although you can play health percentage or defense percentage sets here. I'm going to assume you're on a 14% health exclusive equipment, and that also you have a triple S imprint for Shuna since it is a free character. Looking at the desired stats, I have 1,291 attack. This is simply Shuna's base attack I-90 weapon with the recommended artifact. Defense is 1,600. HP is 19k. Speed is 210. The reason I went for this level of defense and health and speed is it's very akin to Destina. It's kind of similar numbers gear-wise to what Destina is wearing, but Destina obviously has 600 more base HP, so obviously 1600 defense, like 21k HP is what you're going to get with the same amount of gear on Destina, so we kind of had to shift it to see what it looks like for Shuna here. No critical hit chance or critical damage because we're not a damage dealer. Effectiveness, I don't think you could squeeze it in, but if you could get like 50%, so that way the strip and the sleep is a little bit more reliable on certain characters, especially in the later parts of Battle Frenzy, because I do expect that this character will be used in standard versus standard most of the time. That could potentially work. And then effect resistance is 200% because we're going to try and use her very similar to Destina as like a cleanser. 200 might not be enough. You might need to go a bit higher. I've seen as high as 240, but again, those are people with truly insane gear. Again, this is just my hypothesized build with what I have laying around. Taking a look at the right side, we're on a health percentage necklace with an effect resistance ring. Boots are going to use speed. Artifact is Unfading Memories because no matter what button you press on Shuna on Unfading Memories, it is an AoE heal for the team, and it provides effect resistance, which makes her a little bit more reliable as an actual cleanser. Looking at the per piece average, it is 22% health, 17% defense, 7 speed, and 16% AR, which I recognize all those numbers are a bit high. You could still feasibly get this to work. It is going to just require some very good gear. I think that Shuna is a character that will require very good gear to do super successful. So the other Shuna build I want to highlight is actually the one that Big Smo plays in Legend. He was not having a lot of success with this build. When I was watching him, he was losing, I would say, like probably 66% of the time. So 1 in 3 games he was drafting Shuna, he was winning with this build. That said, he was losing a lot to other Shunas. So yeah, don't write the character off just yet. This is just his hypothesis that he came up with when I actually talked to him. So he is on a counter set with resist as the offset. You could play health or defense as per usual. Desired stats here are going to be very similar, you'll notice. Same attack, 100 more defense, but you'll notice that he is only on 185 speed because he's on counter set. This is actually the same speed that I have on speed set, just adjusted without the speed bonus. So 185 and also 210 on speed are functionally the same. You'll notice he has dropped, though, the effect resistance to 185, again, for that extra defense. Looking at the right side, health percentage ring, health percentage necklace, effect resistance ring, speed boots. Artifact is Celestine. He is on a counter set character. He is trying to leverage the fact that the healing on Magicule is not as good as Desert Jewel Bazaar. He's trying to bump up that healing. I can understand the logic. He is more of a turn 2 counter gamer than I am. So again, I respect this and I can definitely understand why he would do this. I personally, again, favor Unfading Memories, but I want to give you, the viewer, the option for how to play Shuna one of 2 different ways. My take on it as well as Smo's take on it. Looking at the per piece average, again, not super different. Here, it's going to be 22% health, 20% defense, 7 speed, 13% AR. So still kind of high Soul Weaver / tank stats on these pieces in order to get it to work. After talking to Fart Pancakes Teresa last night, she was also telling me that she has run into several Shunas as well in the High Emperor or Legend range. And there might be a third Shuna build that I have not heard of, which is on, Ning Ning's Exif, that artifact, as well as a very fast high effect resistance Shuna. People trying to play it as kind of like a fake Ahmed, essentially like a 260, 270 speed Shuna with not too much bulk, like 1414. Trying to play her as essentially like a bootleg Ahmed. That is also potentially a possibility. I don't actually have the numbers on that, so you have to kind of, hypothesize, come up with it on your own, but that is potentially a third way to play Shuna. So on paper, Shuna to me seems very good. Very not as good as Destina, for example, but definitely usable, kind of how Inos was. Might even be a bit better than Inos 2.0. To me, the primary place to play her is, again, standard versus standard when your opponent has already taken Mediator Kaware. She seems very strong in that scenario, and I definitely think that I will be trying her out on my climb to Emperor this season and see how see where she takes me. So hopefully this video was helpful to you. If you're trying out Shuna and you have any other builds, as always, would love to know any and all comments down below. And if I missed anything on Rimuru or Milim's updates, again, let me or your fellow viewers know any and all comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed this very quick, very off the cuff update, how to play update. I will try to do more of these in the future for specific characters if I feel like they warrant it. For example, Politis or Senya, or maybe even Ilanav might actually be up next. Who knows? Stay tuned. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Later now.